Okay, cool one. Just come across this on Twitter. It's like a text morphing effect in pure CSS. Which the first time I saw this, I figured it was possibly a new CSS feature that I'd just never seen before. It really looks as though the text shape, the actual word shape, transforms and the letters turn into another word. I was thinking, how on earth? And I just stared at this for ages. I thought it might make quite a good little video, just try and reverse engineer or break it down and see how it's made. Hopefully it's in a Codepen, so you can just hopefully it's in a little Codepen so we can pick through and look. So basically, yeah, if you look at this effect, the words are seeming to sort of fizzle out, blur away, and then bring in new words. I was just fascinated by how this is done, and obviously there is no JavaScript involved, so there's nothing about animation effects to make the letters transition and shape into different ones. So first thing you notice is that it's not that case because we've got a whole bunch of individual words wrapped in divs. So you can see each one is changing into one. So there's not a CSS property which is like the content. So it's not like some sort of CSS property where the content is kind of shape shifting and changing individual letters. So it's sort of a visual effect. If we dig in here, we've got word, so that's the class for each word, position absolute, it's got an animation which is infinite, and then you've got some SAS to do a loop on animation delay, and this confusing little algorithm for the conditional speed. If I go to view compiled CSS, we can have a look at what it actually generates, what it turns into. Go down here, there it is. So nth child 1, which is this one, has got an animation delay of -16, and the next one, which is this one, animation delay of -14, 12, 10, so it's a 2-second gap. So basically the thing about animation delay, if you have an animation that lasts 5 seconds of somebody jumping, so at 0 you're standing here, at 0 you're standing here, and then you run, at 3 seconds you're in the air, and then at 5 seconds you're down here. If you add an animation delay of 2 seconds, then the animation will just wait for 2 seconds, and then it will run, and then it'll be in the air at 4 seconds, 5 seconds, and then will come down by about 7 seconds. That's all you've done is you've shifted it that way. If you add a minus, so if you set an animation to a -3 second animation delay, it will begin in the air, and it will finish at 2 seconds, and it's because you've shifted the beginning out. So it's helpful if you were trying to debug like a really long animation. You can just set a minus on the delay, and that way you can just jump to the bit you need to get to. But it's also helpful here in some sort of staggered animation. If you incrementally set minus delays on each element, you can then break up or have them overlap in some way. So we can see that there's a 2-second delay, let's uncompile again, between each of these words in terms of the animation it's doing. Let's have a look at that animation. They have an animation of speed, which is 16 seconds, and it's infinite. The first one had an animation delay of -16, and the animation goes on for 16 seconds. So it's basically saying start at the end of the animation, which is the same as saying start at the beginning, because it's infinite, because it will loop. So this is going to carry out the animation, and then the next one will start 2 seconds later, the next one starts 2 seconds later. They're basically all staggered further back, so each one will start, and by the time the final one is finished, it might be around 16 seconds, and the first one's ready to start again. So they've created a good loop. The animation is this: at 0% right up to the first 5%, it's going to have a blur of 0 and opacity of 1. Let's just have a look at these properties. So firstly, let's stop the animation running, which is just going to throw them all in like this. And then let's just take the first word. So a blur of 0, an opacity of 1, does nothing. But then at 5%, still doing nothing. At 20%, becomes a blur of 1m and an opacity of 0. So if we change this to 1m, it just completely vanishes. It's too strong of a value. 0.1, you can vaguely see something. 0.01, there's something, okay. 0.04, bit blurrier. 0.07, yeah, so you see a tiny little bit of this blur filter on this word is kind of eating into the edges of these letters and crushing them up. So by the time you get to 0.1, the entire word has been consumed by this blur filter, just crunching them up, as well as the opacity fading to 0. So 0 to 5% is unchanged. Then somewhere in the first fifth of the animation, by the time it gets to 20% of the way through, which will be the first 2-3 seconds, the word is going to blur, which is going to create that crunch, and it's going to fade out. So it's going to give the effect of morphing, kind of shrinking. And then for the majority of the animation, from 20% to 80% right the way through, it's just going to sit invisible on the page. And then right at the end, basically so that it's ready to loop again, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to go back to its 100% state of blur 0. It's going to reshape itself on the page. Because of that staggering of the animations, it means that as one is using its morph animation to fade out, the next one is at the same time using its morph to fade in. And very cleverly, if you are, let's restore this. And if we just restore these now, you can see it's just let's shrink this down to 5 seconds, say. Basically, just as one is doing its morph out, the next one is doing its morph in, and they overlap. If you change those delays so that one comes in at later, the kind of the illusion is lost. But just by cleverly doing transitions and by making sure that your animation has a start and end so that it will loop and it interlocks well with another element, you've created a really convincing effect that the word is actually shaping and shifting into another word, and these elements are actually combined in some way. So that was really interesting. It might be worth doing this for a few more things. We try and find an interesting bit of CSS and then pick it apart, because it's a really great way of learning about how things are done in CSS and what the properties or the components are to construct interesting features. That's all. Have a good day.